We'll keep moving along and pass it over to Andy with California. Andy, you're up there. You ready to roll?
We're
Looks
good.
good. Yep, you're good to go.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Two quick things before we get started. First off, for California, we have no official detections or no official populations, I should say, of spotted lanternfly in the state. And second to that, I will also be talking about dog teams later on too. So you will have another presentation that talks about detector dogs. So my name is Andy Cline. I'm the assistant. Yeah, Scott, I knew you would appreciate that. And Michael, I've had the same experience with my dog too. So hopefully she will remain quiet through this presentation as well. So my name is Andy Cline. I'm the assistant director here at the Plant Health and Pest Prevention Services Division at CDFA. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about spotted lanternfly. So we're really going to be talking about, for California, since it is not here, really our prevention strategies and the preparation that we're doing, on the potential for SLF to actually be introduced into the state. So here's a brief overview of what I'll be discussing today. Essentially, first and foremost, impacts, right? Why does CDFA care about SLF? And I think it'll resonate with you guys once you see it, why we do care about this. Preventing SLF introduction into California, we do believe that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, just like Benjamin Franklin said with regards to those fires back in Philadelphia way back when. This may not be fires, but it would be our fire if SLF did occur here. So we're definitely looking at prevention. We'll then talk about our early detection survey. This is something we do on an annual basis that we've been doing for the last 5 years. Then we'll transition to our spotted lanternfly action plan on the off chance that something does get in. What would we do about it? And then we'll finish up with some research and outreach partnerships that we've been engaging in for the last few years. And then, time permitting, we'll go into some Q&A as well. So why do we care? What are the impacts that we see in California? Well, first and foremost, it is great. But everybody should know that California, we produce hundreds of different specialty crops here. We grow hundreds of different fruits, vegetables, nut tree crops, hundreds of thousands of acres, millions of acres actually, of these specialty crops across the state, which could potentially be hosts for spotted lanternfly. But grape is of primary concern because we do know that grape is a host in other areas. So the California grape industry represents 100% of the raisin production, over 98% of the table grapes, and about 89% or so of the wine grape production in the entire US. So this is California's #1 specialty crop. And this single commodity does represent tens of billions of dollars in revenue. And if we were to take into account all of the ancillary businesses associated with grape, including ag tourism, a lot of folks come to California to see and visit our vineyards. We're looking at about a $50 billion impact annually to the state if we had dramatic loss of grapes. So yes, we're very interested. We do know, as everybody knows, mass feeding does kill the vines. Spotted lanternfly is gregarious. If you've got one, you've got many. It does form dense aggregations. As folks have shown, the nymphs and the adults, they're coming out and they're very active in and around harvest time. So this can affect the ripening of the grape, but it also affects sugar content. And sugar content is something that is highly monitored by wine grape growers because it's very important to them for their final product. Secondarily, there's honeydew secretion from these insects, which does produce sooty molds, and that can affect the photosynthesis of these plants. And this really is a highly impactful quote from the Pennsylvania Secretary of Agriculture. It was many years ago when they said it, when they were really starting to see the impacts to grape there in their state is, we have vineyards in Pennsylvania that after 2 years are dead. They're done. Kills the plant, you're out of that business. So imagine the impacts in California if something like this were to become established and widely dispersed across the state. So could SLF actually establish in California definitively? Yes. You folks have probably seen this from Wakey et al. From the Journal of Economic Entomology. It's the potential distribution of spotted lanternfly in the US. This was done based on some niche modeling. I know we're all looking at that eastern side of the country, but I want you guys to take a peek at California over there. And you'll see all of that hot orange and reddish area in the Central Valley and along the coast. Well, guess what? That's where about a little over 850,000 acres of grape are actually grown, the Central Valley and the coastal area of California. We've also partnered with the U.S. Forest Service and USDA to do a little bit of ground truthing, if you will, of this distribution model. They used environmental chambers, and they found that indeed spotted lanternfly could persist and complete its life cycle in Lodi and in Napa. So Lodi is in the middle of the Central Valley. Napa is more coastal. And for folks who don't know California, there's many different ecozones and climatic zones within the state, and within the Central Valley, where Lodi is, very, very hot, arid, dry summers. And the coastal area is more buffered, more temperate, and a little bit more humid. So there's really two different, even though they're only separated by about 100 miles, they're very much in two different climate zones. And yes, they were able to persist in either of those. We do think that there's a high risk of introduction of SLF into California, in particular with regards to long distance dispersal, or that jump spread that we've heard about. Right now, there are at least 17 states with known infestations. There's no federal domestic quarantine. So we've heard today a lot of states have their own quarantines. And Annie, thank you. We've been trying to work with all of the states to come up with arrangements where we can continue to have commerce and go through compliance agreements and those sorts of things to make sure that trade continues to happen. Probably one of the big concerns for us is that we are seeing multiple egg masses on an annual basis intercepted at our border stations. So if you've never been to California, if you've never drove a car, I should say, into California, we have 16 border stations strategically located at every major highway and interstate that enters into the state. And they are manned by some of our regulatory staff that do inspections for all sorts of different things. And we are starting to see egg masses, because we all know that egg masses can be laid on practically anything, but we are seeing them on an annual basis. So how do we prevent SLF from actually making it to and entering in California? So we talked a little bit about the border stations. This is one of our southern stations on the top left there. So when you come into California, you'll have to go through this station. You'll go through one of the lane, or not this station, but a station. And you'll have to go through these lanes, and you'll be stopped, and the inspectors will be asking you questions, but they're also potentially going to inspect the conveyance that's transiting through. Could be a truck, could be a car, could be a U-Haul, a pod, commercial vehicles. Our folks are doing their due diligence to look at everything as much as possible. So household items, RVs, all of those sorts of things that may be a mechanism for these things to long distance dispersal into California. We do have detector dog teams. This is a great partnership that we have with our county agricultural commissioners and the USDA. So in California, we have a county agricultural commissioner system. So just about every county within the state has its own agricultural commissioner that acts as the local regulatory official for agricultural activities. And they've got detector dog teams that go out to freight forward and cargo distribution centers to look at these parcels and things coming in that may have plant material associated with them. We do cargo plane hold inspections. We'll talk about that, as well as our detection survey in a minute. But I want to draw your attention to something down at the bottom right. We have what we call Pest Prevention University, and it's a training opportunity that we have with all of the county agricultural commissioner staff. So each and every year we do Pest Prevention University to go over pests of concern. They could be new and different, or they could be something that we just want to make sure everybody continuously has an awareness of. And so spotted lanternfly is something that we talk about each and every year. And this training impacts and is designed for hundreds of regulatory officials across the entire state. So we're broadening our detection network as much as possible with Pest Prevention University. Going back to the border station and high-risk aircraft inspection efforts. So we do Japanese beetle aircraft inspections every year. We look at thousands of different planes to understand what's happening with Japanese beetle. That is a quarantine level pest for us. But we're finding spotted lanternfly, and they're mostly adults, in those cargo holds. And they're almost always dead or moribund, but it brings to attention that this is a potential pathway, although we don't think that necessarily it's a viable one for the adults. because these hemipterous, if you will, these insects that need to be plugged into a plant and feeding on the plant vasculature, they don't persist for long periods of time when they're not actually plugged into a plant. But we are seeing them in these cargo holds. At the border stations, we are finding all life stages. So that could be nymphs, adults, and egg masses, but mostly egg masses. And that's what we think is the highest risk because these have been viable egg masses. The nymphs and adults have been dead. This time last year, back in 2024, I think somebody had mentioned previously, this demonstrates the due diligence and the great effort that we have through our inspection folks at our border stations. But they have this piece of metal artwork, this large piece of metal artwork that was originating from an infested area back east with a destination of Sonoma County. And Sonoma and Napa County, of course, are synonymous with some of our major wine grape growing areas in the state. And we had over 30 viable egg masses that we were able to, with cooperation from the USDA and our ag commissioners, able to mitigate each and every one of them. So we are seeing them in all sorts of outside of the box, if you will, articles that are coming into the state. What do some of our survey activities actually look like? You guys have heard folks talk about PestCast, and if you want more information, there's a link here, but I'll also provide this presentation as a PDF for anybody that may want it. So we time out our survey activities based on PestCast for that 1 to 50% adult emergence. We want to be out and about when things are active because we believe that that's going to be when our visual surveys are going to be most efficacious. So that's July through October. Now, California is a very, very large state. It's over 166,000 square miles. So it's a lot of area to cover. So we typically start in the south and end in the north, starting sometime in July and finishing in October. We've been working with the iEco lab at Temple University. You guys have heard from Matt Helmuth, but he's been helping us to produce, a risk-based survey, if you will. So we're able to deploy our resources in the most effective manner possible. So we're in the right spots that are of the highest risk for introduction of SLF. So the goal of the survey for us is really to survey counties with the greatest number of sites at high risk for that egg mass movement. And really, it's not just eggs coming from the East Coast. Remember, Pennsylvania, it didn't originate there. It originated in Asia. So we also look at international ports of entry too around those to make sure that we're surveying risks from the eastern infested areas as well as infestations that may derive from the actual origin of the species. So we're doing this type of risk-based based on some of the data that we've gotten from Temple, but we also look at what we call our 88A shipments coming from the East Coast. And these are shipments that have come through the border stations. We've looked at them, inspected them, but we've also sent them on to the counties and we've given the counties a notification so that they have the ability to inspect them as well. And this was a recommendation from our ag commissioners as well as our primary state entomologist. This is just a peek into how we, how we do our scouting protocols for finding hosts. Essentially, we'll go to a survey site, we'll look in a quarter mile, and if there's no hosts present, meaning tree of heaven or grape, then we'll go out to a half mile. If nothing's in that half mile, then we'll go to a different site. But we're constantly looking for the hosts. And if we find the hosts, then this is what our visual survey, sort of in a nutshell, looks like. We're really looking for all life stages. We're looking for egg masses. We're looking for the nymphs and the adults, but we're also looking for potentially feeding damage because that would be an indicator that we need to intensify our efforts. So this is what we do each time we go to a site and each time we see any tree of heaven or grape. We're taking the deep dive on each and every tree or vine that we find. And this is just a very basic overview. If you guys want some additional detail on the technical side of it, happy to have that conversation as well later. What have our survey results looked like? Now, we've been doing this survey for 5 years, but I've mapped out here the last 3. We've never detected any SLF as part of our official annual detection survey. And we've surveyed now thousands of sites across the state. The sites change each and every year. This last year, we went to a total of 561 sites. 424 of them were tree of heaven, and then you see the rest were grape. And if we went to a site that had no host, we did actually go to yet a different site. So you can see on the map there, they're color coded for each of the different years, and we've gone pretty much north to south the entire distance of the state. So what if something is found? We do now have a CDFA spotted lanternfly action plan. This was developed in 2022. We convened a science advisory panel in 2021, which is something that we're statutorily mandated to do through Food and Ag Code. So anytime we make alterations to our pest prevention system, whether that's detection, exclusion, eradication, or management, we consult with that outside experts. Some of those folks that were panelists on this are probably on this call today. And thank you again for your assistance with this, but we gave them 50 questions. Then they provided us recommendations. Here are those recommendations. And the intent of this SAP was to develop that action plan. This is 5 of the 50. So this is some of the more salient things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but rather to say it's all available on our website. The SAP questions and recommendations are there. The action plan is there. If you guys want to go there and take a look at the details of this action plan, we've tried to make it somewhat California centric. There's definitely different floral components in California than in the Eastern US. There's different things that we grow here, ag commodity wise, that aren't grown in other areas. And so we tried to make it as situationally specific as possible, giving us, of course, some flexibility and capacity for adjusting as needed. But we also discuss outreach partners and the communication plan as well. Just a few items for how we're supporting research, and we've been doing this for many years now. And this is just a few of them. There are other ways and other research efforts that have been done as well, but biological control with UC Riverside, looking at parasitoids for the spotted lanternfly itself. Pathway and establishment, as I've discussed previously with regards to Temple University, USFS, and USDA. And then this host range impacts. Again, we have a lot of different plants here, whether that's native or whether that's, agricultural than other parts. And so, one of the concerns we have is that this particular species may demonstrate some level of ecological release when it actually does come to California. So we want to better understand and have as much of a refined regulatory approach as possible, or response approach, I guess, if you will, to this, by better understanding what other potential hosts may be present here, so that we can understand and be prepared to respond in a much more refined fashion. And then the last bullet you'll see there, we're also looking at and funding research to determine whether SLF is a potential vector of Pierce's disease and red blotch of grape. The insects that are in this, related to this group of Fulgoromorphs and some of these other things, they are known to be able to vector various diseases. So we want to understand that vector potential for SLF as well. Finishing up with some outreach activities that we've done. Talked a little bit about Pest Prevention University previously. Annie mentioned, I believe, some work that they've done with master gardeners. We've also partnered with the UC Master Gardener program here in California to develop a training program, a Sentinel program for them to roll out. And they've now rolled it out to thousands of master gardeners statewide. And this is really helping us to expand our detection network. These are super interested folks. They love what they do. They're fully engaged, and they're in the places in the urban and suburban environments where we may actually get an introduction of spotted lanternfly. So it's good to have these folks out there that are trained and ready to rock and roll. And anyone can go through this training module that's been developed. It's not just for California. So there's a link here that if you guys are interested, how we've partnered with the UC Master Gardener program, feel free to take a peek at that. Our Pierce's disease glassy winged sharpshooter board also developed a communications toolkit, an advertising campaign that's on our website. If you guys are looking for additional ideas on potential outreach, topics, this is maybe potentially a good resource for you. And then finally, we have been coordinating with other states and the National Plant Board to help develop a harmonized SLF quarantine template. And that is something that CDFA did use to develop its current and ongoing state exterior quarantine. And I think that's about it. Yeah. So Scott, that's what I've got. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, appreciate it. There were a handful of questions that came in the Q&A, but I'll make mention that I think we're doing a change of plans again and having Cecilia come present tomorrow. So, Cecilia, I see you on. Can you confirm that you're good for tomorrow and not today, right now?
Absolutely. If
Okay.
you prefer me today, I could do that, but yeah, I have it scheduled for tomorrow.
As long as you're good for tomorrow, we'll save it for tomorrow with the rest of the education and outreach side of it, if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Scott, I'd be happy to do my presentation again if you want an encore.
And there was no dog too, Andy. So if you want to do it over with a dog in the
Well,
background,
there was a one picture of a detector dog, but that was
right?
early on. But yeah, they're honest to goodness, they're fantastic. They're not just for SLF, but we use them for or utilize them and their teams for looking for plant materials, generally speaking, too. And so that's
Of
been a
course.
big help for us
Cool.
for all manner of invasive species, pests, and diseases.
Yep. I'll make a joke that I have 3 of them at home and they're all pretty worthless, but they're good companions. I don't put them to work because they, again, are worthless. So anyway, all right. Well, with that, we'll conclude the presentations. I know there's some questions in the Q&A. Jacob, you want to jump? Are we just going to leave this open for any further questions to come through and panelists kind of hang on?
Yeah, exactly. If
Okay.
there's anybody, excuse me, if there are any panelists who wanted to get back to one of the questions, something where typing out the answer is not complete, feel free to jump in here. Or just you can chat amongst yourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it. So just kind of looking through, I don't know if Saul's still on. There was still one question up from this morning about New Jersey continuing to conduct treatments. I just don't know what context that was in, if that was with regards to any funding issues. So Saul, you know where that one's coming from. If you got it, go
Here,
for
I
it.
don't see the question. Does someone have the question?
It just says, will New Jersey continue to conduct treatments?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're conducting treatments. Absolutely. We're scraping in the winter. We're doing bifenthrin. We're doing dinotefuran. We're doing more bifenthrin. We're trapping. We're doing everything. Absolutely.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, thank you for that. There's a question there from Katie. Again, this one doesn't seem to be in context, but it was shortly thereafter. When will you start surveying these spots? That was right after that question was posed. So I'm assuming it was maybe for New Jersey, but I don't know which spots those are
Was this for
specifically.
the Atlantis mortality study, maybe?
Possibly.
So we've got spots throughout southern and northern New Jersey that are no longer part of our survey because they are not transportation hubs that there's a risk of spread, but they were part of our program when we were eradicating. So in all these locations, we have a map of all the trees that were treated with insecticide, and we can go out and just physically count how many of these trees that should be here are still here. That's what we're in the process of doing right now. And we should come up with a percentage. And I believe her question had something, I did answer it. It had something to do with, what do you attribute the mortality to? It's not to herbicide. The herbicide trees shouldn't be there. They were hacked and squirted. They should be gone. The trees that should be there are the insecticide trees, which were always larger ones, right? 7-inch DVH or larger. And they were never treated with herbicide. So they should be there. If they're not there, why are they not there? And the answer would presumably be many years of spotted lanternfly feeding combined with, we've had some really severe drought. Last year, New Jersey and some other states in the region probably too, but New Jersey had about 3 months without rain. That's not good for trees. And so this is not a scientific study, though. It was not designed as a scientific study. We didn't map non-host trees. I wish we had. I wish it was designed that way. Because if we had, we could say, well, look at these trees. They're still here, and they weren't fed on by spotted lanternfly. These trees are gone, and they were fed on by spotted lanternfly. But this is more of an observation. It's not a scientific study. It wasn't designed to be one. That's not part of our protocol. It's not what we're funded to do. But I wish I wish we had set up a few plots like that. It's just, we didn't have the forethought. And again, we're not a research institution, so it's not really our mandate. But anyway, yeah, that's my answer to that.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting nonetheless. Yep, appreciate it. There was something in here from Eric. Looked like there was a conversation going on about funding. No 2025 funding has been given for SLF, has it? I don't think so quite yet at this point. So
You might want to call on Brianna if she's still on.
yeah, I think Brianna's still on, but
I think I know the answer, so maybe it's announced through PPA through a different platform other outside of the standard and traditional goals. So PPA issues funding through goal 1 through 6. And there is what's also called rapid response funding, and that is typically where state provided funding from the US PPQ is provided, and that is usually dealt with on a state-to-state basis and not part of the PPA 7721 plan. It's from the same pool of money, just announced differently. And if Brianna's on and wants to correct me, feel free.
Sorry, I was just grabbing lunch. No, you handled that correctly. Yeah, I think everything you said is correct. The PPA 7721 and the rapid response funding. So thanks for covering.
No worries, lunch is important.
I see one to Annie. Looks like she's typing that one currently, so we'll move on. Well, Andy, looks like the rest that we have here are pretty much for you.
Working on it.
If you want to answer them live, you can. Instead of typing, I know that can get overwhelming. So, however you want to handle these.
I'll just type them in. Yep, no worries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and Eric followed up with a comment there. So, okay. At this point, we'll open it up for any other questions or anything that that are going to come in. Otherwise, Andy's going to keep working on those California specific questions. So. Oh, and I see Brian, if you wanted to weigh in with some additional thoughts, go right ahead.
Yeah, with regards to the dying Atlantis, we've certainly seen a fair amount of that in Pennsylvania. We generally say the only plants that we see consistently killed are grapes and Atlantis. We don't see pretty much any other species killed. When it comes to the Atlantis, there's some question about whether it's killing the entire tree down through the clonal root, because we do see some resurgence from that, but we're not sure if it's resurgence of suckering or it's the seed bank that's present that starts to resprout and regrow. So it's not like it takes care of the Atlantis completely. And there's certainly a lot of locations that we've seen that the trees aren't killed completely. There's also that phenomenon where we get closest thing you could say is like a bacterial wetwood effect, where they start to froth and foam and the bark will delaminate from the trunk. Those trees tend to die pretty quick, but it's not consistent with every Atlantis tree. And lanternfly seems to be the catalyst that causes it. So there's not 100% to any of it, and but it is very common that we are seeing stands of dead Atlantis where there's been heavy feeding.
Thanks for that, Brian. Yeah, I was kind of curious whether it was going to be something like, death by 10,000 paper cuts, or if it's something else is getting in there that's kind of contributing to it, or if it's one of those complexes that there's just a lot going on, maybe contributing to it. But okay,
and you can't disregard the abiotic of droughts and the weather extremes that we've been having too.
Yep. Question just came in kind of general, I guess, to the panel here is, what do y'all think of SLF risk to forest health? And then I guess another one out to Brian, kind of along the same thread. What impact do you see on black walnut in PA? So, maybe specific to you, Brian, in on black walnut, and then any kind of open it up to general forest health concerns?
So speaking in very, very broad terms, carefully with nuance, we've not seen forest trees, uh, definitely have not seen them impacted to the point of death. We don't also generally see lanternfly persisting in forest situations. It seems to be much more of an edge species. We find it, as you know, was said today, on the railroad tracks and the right of ways, especially where there's a lot of mixed invasives and other things like that in the deeper forest. A lot of that work, the research works, but that we started in Pennsylvania, we just didn't continue because they have not persisted. They may move through in a season or two. They don't stick around. And that's a, you know, ultimately a very good thing for our hardwood forests. They can't seemingly live at all on conifers, so that's good for that. When it comes to forest health, it's very possible to have lanternflies in the forest. It's very possible to have lanternflies to deposit eggs. So there's always that issue of movement with forest products, but we don't see them establishing and persisting in the forest the way that we do in those mixed areas where it's that the interchange of suburbia and forest, or right of ways and suburbia. It seems to be that they do their best in those fringe areas between the different ecosystems. Um, that's really, it's been consistent. As for walnuts, specifically, black walnut is absolutely a hot host, particularly for fourth instars. We've just seen it over and over again. We do see some branch dieback in black walnut, silver maple as well. Sometimes red maple, we see some branch dieback. We see what looks like feeding impacts. There's been some research showing sugar drops, carbohydrate storage is impacted, but ultimately not death of these plants, with a few exceptions. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to tease out, was it attributable to the lanternfly feeding, or can we also throw in excessive rainfall, lack of rainfall, those other fun things that are going on in the same situation. So Penn State, we've taken the tone that it is an additional plant stressor, and the more lanternflies are on it, the more stress there is. So I hope that helps somewhat.
Well, I got you on the queue here. What about urban trees? Anything with regards to like high value maples in the landscape, treatment wise, preventative treatment, reactive treatment, anything along those lines?
Um, it really boils down to what's your goal with the treatment. If you're in a scenario where you're in a high shipping area, you have warehouses, it may well serve you to treat to prevent, as Dr. Corman likes to say, every dead lanternfly is a good one that can't be shipped. So, if that is your goal, to prevent that accidental movement, you can pile them up with a systemic treatment of dinotefuran. You can kill thousands and thousands. I think our record in 1 week on one silver maple was 13,000 dead adults. That's that many fewer egg masses, and if you start doing the math out, it's a lot. However, in the grand scheme of things, it's a very localized impact that you're having. If you are doing it to, quote, protect the tree for health reasons, it's debatable. If the tree's already struggling, it may help it. It may help by taking away that additional sap loss stress. But certainly it's not necessarily a good thing to just automatically treat every tree. And that's what we want to caution against. We don't want to make the problem worse by taking out our beneficials.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'll give you a break here.
Yeah.
Brianna, I think there's one that came here kind of pointed at USDA with regards to railroads. Some states have had issues surveying and treating along railroads due to that easement. Spreads obviously accelerated by railroads. Any insight on the federal level with regards to railroad cooperation or I'll say cooperation and leave it at that.
Sorry, just took another bite of banana, so I'll stop doing
Sorry
it.
about that.
Yeah, so we've been having a lot of issues because there's a lot of third-party work. We don't really work directly with the railroad. We work with Rail Pros and getting a contract through them to facilitate us getting access to the rails. And the other issue is that there's different portions of the rail line are managed by different people. So even if you have a contact that allows you to go on one part of the rail, you might need another contact to allow you to go further down the rail line. So there's just a few challenges, but we're trying to work on potentially getting a more blanket agreement that covers more area. But I think Matt was working on that before he left, so I'll have to follow up on that and see what can be done. But yeah, we haven't made a lot of headway, but we're still able to get access to a lot of different rails depending on the Rail Pros contract and the officers that are there. But yeah.
Thank you, Brianna. Yeah, I think we always talk about expecting the unexpected and kind of having to go, I don't want to say out of our comfort zones when it comes to this pest, but looking at things, conveyances, structures, whatever it may be that we're just not used to looking at, and we're still learning a lot with that. I see the question about other trees as opposed to tree of heaven, and Brian's talking, but just a quick anecdote from here in Illinois is that at our first found infestation site, we're just not seeing it move very far from where it was. It was a lot of tree of heaven, a lot of grape right in the immediate area, but also a stucco building where it seems like they prefer to lay their eggs on that building than they do on any of the vegetation surrounding it that we can see. So I don't know if given the opportunity to lay their eggs on an inanimate object as opposed to plant material may artificially prevent them from dispersing further or more rapidly. I don't know. I'm curious to see what Brian puts in there, but aside from the tree of heaven in the immediate area, we haven't seen much egg deposition on any of the other tree species, be it sugar maple or silver maple or anything in that, again, immediate area. Andy, go ahead. Yeah.
Hey, Scott, sorry. I was just gonna say, I need to log off now, but happy to engage with anybody. If anybody's got any additional questions or wants to have a conversation about anything that CDFA is pursuing, happy to have that conversation. Just shoot me an email.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for jumping on. Appreciate it. And thanks for powering through those questions, Andy.
Yeah, no
Good seeing
worries,
you.
Scott. Yep.
Yep. Take care.
And thank you guys for organizing this and giving us the opportunity to come and give the CDFA/California perspective.
Happy to.
We do appreciate it. Yep. All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care,
Yep.
Scott.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right.
God, just
Hey,
to add on to what you were saying there, in response to that question, I too have observed that spotted lanternfly females will choose non-host trees to lay their egg masses as opposed to the tree that they might be clustering on. They'll move to a tree that we typically don't see them feeding on, or as you mentioned, inanimate objects. So maybe this is a dispersal mechanism for them to get their young out into new places. But it is kind of a curious behavior. And Brian Walsh was responding there, so maybe he could add verbally what he was writing.
And I was just going to follow up, Scott, that here in Indiana, we see a lot of egg deposition on hackberry, especially a larger tree with that corky bark. Those egg masses blend right in there. They can hide right into those ridges, and it's very, very hard to see the egg masses in there. We've also seen them on maple, especially box elder. So that's another tree that we have plenty of here in Indiana, and they like to lay their eggs on those.
And just another quick anecdote too from that from my previous comments is that even on that stucco building, they don't seem to lay their eggs on the sheer wall. They'll tuck it under a roof eave or a windowsill or something to find that sheltered spot. So very much like you'd see on the traps, they like to get in and under something to lay their eggs. And even then, given the opportunity, it seems like they'll lay them on top of each other season after season, or even within the season to keep them somewhat sheltered or unexposed. So, Brian, I see you came off. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's there's a yeah, all this is you're saying we've seen again and again, and the alternate host in we see a very common one is black cherry. They really like to lay their eggs on black cherry bark in the smooth sections. Very infrequently do we see them ever feeding on it, but they will move from the maple next to it. Also, the finding of the eggs on the Atlantis, it often seems like the first year or two of infestation, that's where they're laying their eggs. But it also, this is anecdotal, but it also seems that after a few seasons of feeding, those Atlantis are senescing, dropping their leaves earlier in the season. They're stressed out, they're dropping their leaves, and the egg laying time hasn't started yet. As Melody Keenan was showing us yesterday, they will hang on until that day length change. Very frequent that we see the big depositions take place the first week, second week of October, right after the fall equinox. So if the Atlantis don't have leaves on and they're completely stressed, then they'll move off and find something else to eat. And it's the second best choice and the third best choice, and it depends on what's available in the area. You always start with what's available in the area when you look for hosts. Don't assume that because there's not Atlantis there or there's not something specific there that they're not going to be there. Always look for what's their next favorite choice in that area, particularly when the adults dispersals are going on.
Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate that, Jim made a comment about up in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, seeing it on willows, cherries, sumacs, maples, oaks, even white pines as far as the egg deposition. So yeah, it seems like it's,
Yep.
Whether it's plant material or inanimate objects, anything seems to be pretty fair game. So,
Yep. It's I would have the vineyard I was showing yesterday, there was a rock in one of the rows, and I would have lost the bet that I said there was not going to be eggs underneath that rock because it was so tight and flat to the ground. And it's almost like they burrowed down to get underneath that rock. And sure enough, there were 17 egg masses on underside, tight to the ground. It wasn't even like it was an overhanging ledge, But what you said about overhanging ledges, absolutely. They like to tuck up and under protected areas. So almost always on the undersides of trees. But sometimes on the sheer faces too. There's no hard and fast rules with this bug. It is really a stinker. So
it's funny you mentioned that because I remember Dana telling, I don't know if it was National Plant Board or me particularly or whatever, but even they'll wedge themselves into like shrink wrapping and to the point that they kill themselves. So they
Yep.
just really like those tight spots for
Yep.
whatever purpose it may be. Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna bounce around a little bit here. Brianna, there's another follow-up question about the rail lines. Question, does anyone notice if the eggs are purposely laid on old egg masses, maybe because they see it as a successful egg mass? I have no idea. I don't know if I don't know if they're smart enough to do that, or it's just, Brian, you're not giving them any credit.
We can't say it definitively.
Sure.
Are they picking that spot because it was a good spot and there's both generations are recognizing it as a good spot, maybe. But it does seem to be an aspect where one starts to lay, they will pile them up together. And so you may have one post again in a vineyard. You may have one post that's completely covered and another one that has zero or just a couple. There seems to be some kind of social aspect to the deposition, but we don't have a mechanism that describes it, as the why.
Another comment from Jacqueline. Haven't heard much about China berry, so wanted to throw that out there as for the southern states. They do like them a lot in North Carolina, excuse me. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of variations in geography based on what's available. In Virginia, we've seen different preferred trees in different regions within the state, so therefore complicating things even more. I'm sure you start to bring in elevation and things like that. It's going to create additional variables. Preferred trees in different regions, even when many of the same tree species are present. So, yeah, again, it's going to be one of those expect the unexpected, right?
Scott, I wanted to add real fast that
Please do.
when we go out and survey, since we don't have spotted lanternfly yet, of course we first look for tree of heaven, but kind of to Brian's point earlier, we look for those other hosts. Like, are there walnuts in the area or maples? Like, could they establish there? Thankfully, a lot of times we don't actually find any second or third of their favorite host. But we try to go and do that as well, because we just kind of want to know in that area, like, is it something we should, come back to like every year and check, because we know that that's a risk that something might come or not. So that's one thing we do with our visual surveys.
Yeah. And one that I haven't heard mentioned yet today is roses. The first, second instars really like roses, both cultivated and multiflora rose. And if you have multiflora rose like we do in Pennsylvania, it's everywhere. So it's a common sight to see those first and second instars on that multiflora rose. And going back to that forest question, that's where we were frequently finding them in the forest, was the invasive multiflora rose. That's frequently where they were seen as nymphs, and then often gone by the time they hit as early nymphs, I should say, third, fourth instars. They were pretty much off the roses. But a good indicator species, if you have rose in the area right after hatch, take a look. That there's a good chance, if they're there, that they'll be on those roses for a period.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Astra said Massachusetts, we find loads of them on cottonwoods. They love the crevices. Rachel, West Virginia, we often see egg masses under the bark of standing dead ash trees. So yeah, it's something in the wake of EAB, something to keep in mind. I know here in Illinois, we've seen a lot of spongy moth egg masses on the inside of sloughing off bark, as opposed to anything exposed to the exterior. So yeah, it may be a survival strategy or something, or just a preference, but definitely seems like it's a recurring theme that they like the coverage or secluded areas. Would SLF go after rose hips?
No idea how to answer that one. Rose hips being the spent flowers. I'm not sure how to answer that one, so I'm gonna abstain.
Fair enough.
Greg Parr is mentioning here that there's work on the egg masses showing their two acids predominant, may act as a signal or attractant, which may be tied to the other egg masses being deposited. Not confirmed, but interesting. Yeah, as a mechanism, I'm sure there's some kind of mechanism there. Anecdotally, we see it over and over again where those eggs are piled on top, sometimes from the same season. If it's a really good spot, we'll see egg masses on top of other egg masses. Certainly, we see them piled in with last year's egg masses, and that's also a good thing to train your people what to know they're looking at. Are you looking at this year's egg masses or last year's egg masses? That can get confusing sometimes. Taking a look at and knowing a freshly hatched egg mass this year, within the first couple of weeks after hatch, there's going to look like a white strand hanging out of it. We affectionately call the ripcord. Before they hop out, that white strand is going to come out of the opening with them and hang, and it'll show for a couple of weeks. So you can get a clear idea. Is it a fresh egg, old egg? And that, I mentioned that because it was a regulatory incident in Pennsylvania last year, where there was concern that there were egg masses shipped to a location in Erie, and the concern was there were egg masses on those articles that were shipped And the question was, had they hatched yet or not? And by looking and knowing if the egg masses were new or old, we could tell that they were old egg masses that had appeared to hatch, the new ones hadn't hatched yet before they were found. So knowing your egg ID and how old it is can help too. And also help you age out how long a population's been in that location. You know, if you find egg masses, look at them. They may be 2 or 3 years old, depending on where they're at. So.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I see Brian Eschenauer working on the rose hip question for Josh.
Oh, yeah. I said I could answer that live. Just to wrap up what Brian started. Yeah, the young nymphs will be on the rose plants, but the rose hips are the fruit, right, of the rose, and apple is a rosaceous plant. And we know they don't feed on the apple fruit. So probably there's no concern about the rose hips there that they'd be attracted to. But yeah, the early instar nymphs definitely like rose plants.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. Jonathan. Oh, why can't I scroll here anymore? Something's going on. Can a new county ID be done from egg masses? How do we store or prepare the sample to submit? I'm assuming that, Jonathan, that's likely because, or it'll be in reference to finding it on something established in a county as opposed to something that was coming through it, more of a regulatory incident, right? I don't know how those are identified, or if they can be used for ID. I don't know. This is like a new official confirmation. Okay. I'll confirm with DNA. Thanks, Sven. Appreciate it. Sorry, I fumbled over that a little bit. My bad.
The question is, are you talking about, like you said, found on an object or confirming a new location? There should be some other evidence in that location to let you know you have a breeding population.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Virginia's established new county populations via egg masses. Carved off the bark, placed it in alcohol to ship. Okay. Appreciate everybody weighing in to help answer the questions. Thank you. Well, looks like things have slowed down quite a bit. We'll give it another minute, see if anything else comes in.
Yeah, we'll give our panelists another minute to answer the questions. But otherwise, we can look forward to a bit more tomorrow. We have a panel to talk about the spread of lanternfly into the Southeast and the implications for the industry growing industries down there. We will also have some talks looking at education and outreach beyond the agricultural industry tomorrow. So thank you, everybody. Again, your same registration Zoom link will bring you into tomorrow's meeting. We will do our best to have these recordings posted within the next month, and you'll be able to find the links to that on the same Stop SLF page where you found the agenda and registration for today's event. And thank you all for joining.
Thanks again to all of our presenters and everybody that helped answer the questions today. Appreciate all the effort. And we'll see everyone tomorrow.
Thank you.